Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Gibson. Thank you so much for joining us for Cool Off with Collins. I'm really excited to be here. I know it's summer. Some of us haven't thought about school in a little bit of a while. Some of us are getting ready already, back in gear to head to the classrooms. So I thought it was a good chance for us to just talk a little bit about what's new with Collins Writing. Many of you may have heard that I have taken on a new role with Collins Education Associates. A little bit about me and my background for those of you who I haven't met before. Like I said, I'm Christine Gibson. I started using Collins Writing in my classroom early in my teaching career. Of all the professional development that I experienced throughout those years in the classroom, Collins Writing was the one that made the most difference for me. It really helped me improve my teaching. I felt like my students were learning more. I was a better teacher, and more than anything, I felt like I was shifting accountability from myself to the kids, and the kids were doing a little bit more of the thinking and heavy lifting in the class. And I felt that my job as their coach and instructor was streamlined with using Collins Writing. So fast forward a few years, I took that passion for Collins Writing and I turned it into a new career as a trainer with the company. I've been working now for the past 15 years, bringing Collins Writing to schools and classrooms across the country. I love working with teachers. It's been an excellent opportunity for me to also get into classrooms and continue working with kids as I model and coach teachers in using Collins Writing strategies. And just in the past few months, I am excited to announce that I've taken over as the owner and CEO of Collins Education Associates. So I'm thrilled to be in that position. I'm honored to be able to take something that made such an impact for me and bring it to so many others in schools across the country and even outside the United States. And I really look forward to showing you today some of the plans that we have in place to keep Collins growing and get it into more classrooms. And for those of you who are already using the program, to give you the support that will help you as you embark on the Collins Writing journey with your students. So we're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to talk, for those of you who are new to Collins Writing, some of you may have been invited by a colleague or through word of mouth found out about us. We're going to give you a quick crash course in what is Collins Writing. I'm going to introduce to everyone what does our new website look like and what are some of the new features that you can use to make the website a little more dynamic and engaging. We have a few new things, products and resources that I think you're going to find really helpful. And we'll talk a little bit about how I can help you to bring Collins into your own classroom and what we can do to support you if you've already started that project for your school district. So quick crash course. And for those of you who already are familiar with the program, this might help you to kind of put the pieces together, especially if you're trying to share this with colleagues. For those of you who are new, what you'll find is that everything we talk about here, you can now go to the website and find out even more. So this is going to be admittedly a really quick introduction to the 5 types of writing that are really the heart and soul of what Collins Writing is all about. For more information on any of the 5 types of writing, we are going to take a website detour in a few minutes, and I'll show you some other places where you can look to find out even more and help you to get started with your own practice. So Collins is based on 5 different types of writing. Each writing has its own purpose in the classroom. The idea is that we move students between less formal and more formal writing flexibly to make sure that teachers are using writing with purpose. Writing doesn't always have to be a big deal. So if you're looking at these 5 types of writing that you can see on your screen now, on the left side of the screen, we have our quick writes. So those are going to be your least formal kinds of writing. We call these type 1 and type 2. We build that common language so that when we assign writing to our students, they know exactly what we mean. We cut down on the number of questions. A type 1 writing is a quick write that is of the lowest risk. It's just about getting ideas on paper. A type 2 writing is also a quick write. The difference is that we're going to look for kids to write down correct ideas on paper. So if I'm starting a class and we're going to be learning about rocks and minerals in a science unit, I might start by asking students the simple activate prior knowledge question, type 1 writing, write 4 lines about things you know or think you know about rocks and minerals. At the end of some instruction, I might say to students, we've been learning about different kinds of rocks. Type 2, I want you to write down 3 different kinds of rocks and briefly describe how each type is formed. Now I'm using that writing to check our students' understanding. So while that type 1 was very much about thinking and engagement and just getting kids part of that process in the classroom, the type 2 continued on that trend, but also built in a learning and accountability piece where we're asking students to retrieve what they've learned. Those are the kinds of writing that we look for using every day in our classrooms so that we can get kids participating more, we can get constant formative assessment from our kids, we can get more conversations happening in our classroom, and best of all, students are using retrieval to help them remember what they're learning, so they're going to remember what you've taught a little bit better that way. As we move to the right-hand side of the screen, now we're moving more towards formal writing experiences. A lot of us may have traditionally called these compositions. What we're suggesting here is that type 3, type 4, and type 5 writing are more composed pieces of writing. They don't necessarily need to be longer pieces of writing, just a little more carefully crafted. So in type 3 writing, which is in the middle of your screen and really kind of the meat of the 5 types of writing, this is where we're teaching skills, we're teaching content, we're teaching students how to revise and edit. So for an ELA teacher, this is where you would teach your mechanics, your sentence structure, your how to incorporate voice into writing, how to organize a piece of writing. For content area teachers, you can use type 3 writing as well, but most of your pieces will be about the content. So if we go back to that rocks and minerals example, we could have students write a detailed explanation of how metamorphic rock is formed, and we would give them specific criteria that help us to show what we're looking for. One of the terms that we use a lot in Collins writing is the term FCA, or focus correction areas. Type 3 writing has FCAs. So what that means is when we ask our students to write about how metamorphic rocks are formed, we might say, and as you're writing, here are your FCAs. I'm looking for a clear definition of metamorphic rock. That's one FCA. I want you to define the 3 steps in the formation of that rock. That's a second FCA. And I want you to make sure you use at least 3 science vocabulary in your answer. So no matter which subject you're in, you can use type 3 writing to give really clear criteria to help students become better writers. Students then revise and edit for those things. We might ask them to circle those vocabulary words or number those 3 steps to show us that they've met our criteria. And the most beautiful part is that then as the teacher, instead of using lengthy rubrics, multiple checklists to go through our students' writing, we're just going to grade them or score them or provide them feedback on those criteria. So students know exactly what we were looking for. We teach those things and we provide feedback on those things. Type 4 writing is simply a type 3 writing that adds a peer editing collaboration component. And type 5 writing, that's the most formal kind of writing. And it's actually the one that happens or should happen least in our classrooms. Because with type 5, we're really looking for that error-free quality writing. That's very hard to achieve in most classrooms. And when it is achieved, very often, there's a lot of teacher work involved. And the pieces almost become co-authored by student and teacher. So we actually try to swing towards type 1 through 4 writing for most frequent use in our classrooms and save those type 5 experiences for the really big ones, the ones that really count. Think college essays, articles that are going to be submitted to a poetry contest, newspaper articles for the school publication. Sometimes we might ask students to take a small piece of writing to a type 5. We might say, let's really work on this introduction and let's edit it and revise it to perfection. Every type 5 doesn't have to be a 5, 6, 7 paragraph masterpiece, but we use it sparingly and with purpose. Okay, so that's the nuts and bolts of type 1 through 5 writing, so that when you hear that language throughout this workshop, you'll have an understanding of what all of that means. What I'd like to do as we move forward is show you some resources on the website that'll help you learn more. So if you're a new Collins user, we'll start with those resources that'll give us the basics of Collins. Then we're going to look at some free resources that you can find that you might use to supplement the Collins work that you're already doing or to get started with some Collins work in your classroom. And we're going to end this piece of the session today with talking about some of the latest research that we have that kind of really strengthens everything that we do with Collins writing. We want to make sure that you're getting something to use in your classroom that actually works. So we'll talk to you a little bit about what that research looks like and what our results have been in other classrooms. So let's take a detour to the website. When you hit our landing page, you can find some general information about the program, but what I'm going to really gear us to are a couple of key spots today. The first two drop downs for the what is Collins writing and the 5 types of writing will give you the basics, kind of a review of what we just talked about. What I want to do is skip down to type 1 and 2 and then type 3 and 4 writing so that we can dig deeper into those. So when you get to this type 1 and 2 page, you'll see some information that talks about the benefits of quick writes in your classroom and some samples of what they might look like. What I want to really do is scroll down to one of my favorite additions to the website, which are the sample papers. When I was a teacher learning Collins writing myself, it was really helpful for me to see actual student writing and what it would look like in the classroom. Because it's easy for me to sit here and say, here's how you do Collins writing. But we all have students who come to us from different places with different needs and different strengths. It's really helpful for us, I think, to look at some examples of student writing. So for type 1, 2, 3, and 4 writing, you're going to find lots of samples right on the website that are not only showing you authentic pieces of writing collected from real classrooms, but that are annotated with some tips and strategies. So I'll give you an example. This here that you're seeing is a type 1 writing in a high school classroom. This is a very straightforward use of type 1 writing. How often do we start our class? By going over homework. And we say, does anyone have questions about the homework? That's a perfect opportunity for a type 1 writing. Rather than waiting for a couple of the same kids to raise their hands with an answer, we say, everybody take out a piece of paper. While I'm going around to check that you completed your homework, I want you to answer this type 1 question. What's one problem that was hard for you in last night's homework? And explain what made it difficult. So what you see here is one student's answer. This was written in about 3 or 4 minutes. We're not spending a lot of time on these, but now as the teacher, I'm going around and looking at the kids' homework. I'm also looking to see which problem they highlighted as the most difficult. That's going to help me to gear today's homework discussion in the right direction. And it forces everybody to be doing some thinking during that time, rather than kids talking and chatting and rummaging around their backpacks during those first few minutes of class. Now, type 1 writing doesn't just happen in the content areas. We have examples here from a music classroom, activating prior knowledge about symphony orchestra. And one of my favorite examples, I always love the primary examples. This is a kindergarten student who's using a picture and some attempt at making words to answer the question, what's one thing that makes you happy? So it's a type 1 question. We're not looking for a right answer, just looking for kids to get some ideas down. As we scroll down, we can find some examples of type 2 writing. So type 2, remember, it looks like a type 1 writing on paper, but the expectation is just a little bit higher. We're now looking for a correct answer. So if I scroll through some examples, here's an example using the rock example. Explain how rocks become metamorphic. Use 4 lines. So asking them to use at least 4 lines gives them a quota and tells them how long the writing has to be. So it tells the kids, gives them some parameter, because some kids will try to take the easy way out and just write that 1-word answer or those two words. Use 4 lines. Make sure you tell me enough about how they become metamorphic. And the feedback here is really simple. I'm not going to suggest that you collect these and grade them. Look over the shoulder, get a formative assessment in the moment, give the kids some positive feedback if they got it, give the kids, circle, put a little mark on their paper that shows if they didn't get it, talk about it as a class and move on. You can even try self-scoring with your kids. I'll show you an example of what that looks like. This is in an art classroom. Students were writing about art techniques that they had used. They were asked to describe 2 techniques. You can see the student describe their 2 techniques. And then instead of the teacher checking these, the students just shared their answers as a class. And as they shared different techniques they'd use, the teacher wrote them on the board. Students were to check off the ones that they wrote about, and any that they didn't write about, they were to add at the bottom of their sheet below the line. You can see them circled on this example. Now students are engaged in the feedback process. They're taking ownership of their work. They're taking notes. And no one has to collect and grade these. Type 1 and 2 writing is not about a grade. It's about thinking, accountability, engagement, formative assessment, and it will do wonders for the level of participation in your classes. If you're interested in other samples, if you're like me and love samples, if you go to the type 3 and 4 page, you can find more. So we give you a little more information about what FCAs are about, how to use them. I love this section of the page where we can see some really clear examples of what a type 3 paper might look like. So you remember, those of you who are new, we talked about having FCAs, focused correction areas, that guide students in what we expect and guide the feedback we provide. We don't leave those a secret. We write them at the top of the paper. In fact, we encourage students to do the writing of those FCAs at the top of the paper. Many teachers, like the ones here, use points allotted for each of the FCAs, and that becomes the scoring rubric. A lot simpler than a full page rubric with multiple criteria that we're looking for, time consuming for us as teachers to provide that level of feedback, and generally a waste of time because most students don't look closely at the rubric before turning their paper in and only look at where the circles are when they finish it. They're really not looking closely at what skills of writing are being demonstrated. So this is a way to get students to write down those skills and show them specific feedback. There are lots of examples of type 3 papers here from actual classrooms. You can see here another student who's handwritten her work, and you can see her FCAs up in the left-hand corner. Okay, so you get a good look at that. And then I want to show you again, we can certainly type these. They don't have to be handwritten. And this works with our littlest writers as well. So in the primary grades, we suggest using icons or images to symbolize the different requirements. So this was a kindergartner who was asked to draw a picture of how apples grow. The FCAs, that crayon box, if you look really close, it has a 3 in it. Very, very tiny. That reminded the student to use 3 realistic colors in his picture. That's giving information at a kindergarten level. The second FCA was the label FCA. Students were moving towards labeling their pictures, not just drawing the picture, but actually labeling it. And they were taught how to do that. The third FCA is a little block that says resources in it. In this particular classroom, the teacher was always telling students, use your resources. You can look at the word wall. Here's a poster. And in this case, there was a huge poster with all the different color words on it. So the teacher said, when you're labeling your picture, use some of these color words. Here's your resource. Use your resource. So students, even at the youngest, most emerging levels of writing, can use FCAs to guide their writing, and they can help us provide feedback. So if I was giving Arthur feedback, he would get a star for all 3 of these criteria because he met all of them. Some other things, if you're looking for what kinds of FCAs are good FCAs, we have a couple of resources. These are here on the type 3 page. They're also on our free resources page, which we'll look at in a moment. You can find standards aligned FCAs for the different genres of writing, narrative, informative, argument, and so on. And you can also find some other ideas in specific type 3 assignments on our free resources page, which we're going to look at in a moment. So let's take a look at that free resources page. When you hit free resources, you're going to go to your teacher resources. And we've reorganized the page. A lot of you have told me in the past that you love finding these free resources. We've reorganized it for you so that it makes it a little easier, hopefully, to find things, especially once you get used to the new system. Incidentally, when you get to this page, you're going to see a pop-up for our Collins Writing Exchange. This is our newsletter. We issue this newsletter 6 to 8 times a year. It has new ideas, articles, links to research, free downloadables that you can grab several times a year. Many of you who are here already have subscribed to the newsletter and are getting it in your inbox. If you haven't, I highly suggest that you click subscribe, and we will send you free stuff, free ideas every few weeks. Back to our free resources. So what I love, especially for those of you who are getting ready to start a new year, if you hit the Collins Basics, you can find the different kinds of paper that we use with Collins Writing. So you saw those papers where it has spots for the FCA or the little boxes for those kindergarten FCAs. You can find those here underneath Collins Basics. You can print them out and use them with your kids. You can find some great writing prompts to use at the beginning of the year to get to know your kids and get to know them as writers. If you're new to Collins Writing and are struggling with how to explain this to parents, we have letters that you can download and send to parents so that they understand these different types of writing and why you're not going to fix every error on the kid's paper and what are these FCAs at the top. So we have a lot of good stuff here that's especially great for the beginning of the year. Okay. We also have a whole page dedicated to type 3 and 4 writing. And when you get there, what I think most teachers seem to like the most is when we scroll down to the type 3 assignments and lesson plans. So what you have here are actual plans for lessons that you can take students through. They are type 3 lessons, which means they have FCAs. We have lessons in all the different genres of writing. And most of these can be used across content areas with our students. So not only does it have a prompt and FCAs, but it actually will walk you through the process of how you would teach this in your class. And it's almost scripted for you. So if you're a new Collins user, these are a great way to start using type 3 writing. One of my favorites for the start of the year is the Who Am I personal essay, or the Who's Who mystery classmate. This is a great way. The kids are interviewing each other, they're writing about each other, and then the class reads them and have to guess who the student is that's being described. So not only is this a great type 3 assignment that gets kids learning how to write and use description, but it also is writing for a real audience. You're not just writing for the teacher, but it's giving them something to do. And it's a getting to know you activity for the start of the year. The last thing I want to draw your attention to on the website, recently, there's been a lot of push in the education world, as I'm sure you know, with the science of reading. So many, there have been a lot of questions raised about, is the way we've been teaching reading for the past several decades, is it the right way? And more research is coming out regarding what is the best way for students to learn how to read. Now, Collins obviously is primarily a writing company. However, we are very tuned into the research on how students learn and how students learn to write. So if you're interested in learning about what is it that makes Collins work, you're going to go to the Why Choose Collins Writing tab. And what you can find is some basics about the rationale behind what we do and some of the research. So we've pulled excerpts from several different studies that cite evidence of how students learn and the best way for them to do that. And if you click on any of these, you can get the full article so that you can read the whole study, or you can just take the kind of Cliff Notes version, look at here's something, that teachers shouldn't be able to grade everything. If so, kids aren't doing enough writing. Well, type 1 writing helps you find lots of time for writing. And you don't have to grade it all. So we link all of the research that we've learned to something in our practice to show you this really works. This is based in research on how students learn. We also have some case studies. We only have a sampling of them here. We have probably a dozen more of these, but we put 5 or 6 of them on our website so that you can see how Collins Writing has worked in various school districts across the country. And even in Australia, we have a school district that worked with us to put together a case study. So you can read how the school implemented Collins Writing, what strategies they focused on, and then you can see actual hard data based on standardized test results that show growth from before Collins Writing to after Collins Writing. So you can choose any of these case studies. There are about 6 of them here. Any one of them is going to give you solid information about the actual results that we've seen. So we can look back at the research, or we can look at the results that we've actually seen. Okay, so considering all of this, you have a little sense now of what you can find on the website. For those of you who are new to Collins, remember the website can help you learn more. For those of you who maybe have been using Collins, now hopefully you can find some new ideas on the website, ways that you can freshen up your practice and try some new things with your students. So we also have some new stuff, and some of you might be familiar with some of these things. For others, you're hearing about them for the first time. So I want to introduce you to a few new things. First one is Writing Roadmap. The second one is a resource called the Retrieval Routine. And the third is Sentence Expansion. So Writing Roadmap was kind of a passion project of mine during the pandemic. I felt that teachers so often weren't sure where to start with teaching FCAs, and that it was a lot of a guessing game, just kind of pulling FCAs out of a hat. So we said the right way to teach FCAs is to know what do our students need and teach to those things. So what I created with Writing Roadmap was a pre-assessment tool. It includes prompts that you would use with your students at the start of the year, rubrics that you would then use to score students on those responses. and class checklists for recording the data that you collected from your students as a class. Once you see all your students' benchmark levels on one page, it's much easier to prioritize and figure out which skills do students need most. So our rubrics are aligned to general standards for writing, and they're broken down into 4 levels of performance, from we're just not seeing that skill in the writing all the way up to advanced levels of performance. Rubrics are more time consuming than using FCAs. That's why I recommend using them sparingly. Beginning of the year, to get a big picture of what our students need, that's the right time for rubrics. Once we've finished scoring our students with this rubric, Writing Roadmap has a cross-referenced index of FCAs that are linked back to the rubric. So, for example, in the rubric, one of the skills that 6th graders should be able to undertake is writing a reflective concluding paragraph. Many 6th graders are not doing that. How do we get them started? It's not enough to have an FCA that says, write a concluding paragraph. But what we might start with is, let's teach them how to write a closing sentence that calls to action. Or let's teach them how to have a closing paragraph that paraphrases a claim. So we can give them specific skills to help them to develop that larger skill. It's the same for our younger students. If we have a kindergartner who is learning how to include details in a picture, many kindergartners are not doing that from day one. They're taking that red crayon, they're scribbling over the paper and calling it, that's a picture of my mom. How do we take that to the next step? What are some FCAs we can use for those students? So if that's a skill students need, we might ask them to make sure their picture is at least the size of your hand so that it's big enough. We might ask them for 3 realistic colors. We might ask them to point to 3 details in the picture. We might ask them, as we saw Arthur earlier, to label their picture with details. These are all ways that we can develop some of those skills in the rubric using FCAs once we know what our kids need. So Writing Roadmap will give you the tools to do that. The last part of Writing Roadmap is actually dedicated to student writing samples. So the samples are in the book for 2 reasons. One is, if you can see writing samples that are scored using our rubric, it'll help you to know, am I scoring these accurately for each grade level? So you can kind of cross-reference those rubrics to see, I have a writer that looks like Avery, who you see on your screen now. How did the experts score this paper? We've annotated those rubrics so that you understand why we gave students the scores that we did. But the second reason we have these papers in our Writing Roadmap is so that you can actually use them in your classroom. We don't want them to stay hidden here in the back of the book. We want you to be projecting these onto your document camera and saying things like, let's take a look at Avery's writing. Does she have a topic sentence that restates the prompt? The prompt was, what was a challenge that you faced in your life? Avery starts her writing with, my challenge was riding a bike. Yeah, Avery did a good job of restating the prompt. So we can use Avery's paper as an exemplar for some of the skills that she demonstrated well. We could also use Avery's paper to teach hooks later on in the year and say, it's great to start with a sentence that restates, but sometimes that can be kind of boring and it doesn't get our attention. Let me teach you how to write a hook. Let's look at Avery's paper and see if we can help her write one. So by having this bank of papers, and there are about 15 of them in the guide, you can pull these from your book onto a screen or hand them out to students and have students actually work with these to revise and analyze those pieces. And once you get really good at doing that, you can start using samples that you collect on your own in the same way. So Writing Roadmap is a great tool. It's available in a hard copy like you see here, spiral bound. You can also get it as a PDF if you're a very digitally savvy person. The second resource we have is Retrieval Routine. Dr. Collins created this routine. It's basically a 4-day process that takes kids each week through several steps that will help to reinforce and retain content. So this is great for you content teachers. Writing Roadmap is a little bit ELA focused. Retrieval Routine is really for any content area teacher. So the guide helps you to understand, what does Make a Question Monday mean? What does Take It Tuesday? What's Work Together Wednesday? What's Throwback Thursday? In a nutshell, each day students are using different retrieval activities that are centered around type 2 writing, since that is our really retrieval heavy type of writing. And this is meant to take 5 to 10 minutes of class so that they're reviewing content, they're writing about what they're learning, and they're interacting with each other. So Monday and Tuesday are really about practicing and reviewing current content. Wednesday is a collaborative day where students are working together to practice and learn content. And Throwback Thursday, this tends to be a teacher favorite. Throwback Thursday is interleaved and spaced practice. So we're basically reviewing content, not from this week, but maybe 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, or really throw them for a loop 3 months ago. So we're cycling in that kind of spiral practice. And all of this retrieval is proven to make kids remember learning better. And like I said, you can read about that more on the website. The third new item that's going to come out, and it's going to come out in a similar form as Retrieval Routine. So Retrieval Routine has a laminated guide. There's also a supplemental book that gives you more information and more resources. Sentence Expansion is also going to come out in a laminated guide. And this is going to be a great short type 3 for any content area. So I've shown you 2 examples on this slide. The first one is an ELA kind of sentence expansion. In both cases, students are working with a very basic sentence, like the house was creepy or the war ended. And they're expanding that sentence using specific parameters. So it's getting kids to write more complex sentences with more detail, with greater improved voice, and more specific content. So in the house was creepy example, that's going to be an ELA-based example. So the teacher is working with students on adding literary devices, adding descriptive words. And you can see that the student wrote those FCAs down and then showed in her writing where she did it. She boxed her descriptive words. She labeled the literary device that she used, imagery. And we easily expanded the sentence to a much longer sentence, had to be at least 15 words, and you can tell without even counting that it is. The second example is from a social studies classroom. Students were learning about the Vietnam War. The war ended. That's a very basic sentence, the kind of answers that we often see in our students' writing, especially in the content areas. So the FCAs for this student, this social studies teacher, they said, I don't just want the war ended. I want 2 specific facts about the end of the war. I want 2 vocabulary from the unit, so you sound like you learned something. And since we're talking about a war, we're probably going to be naming that war and maybe naming some people or places involved. Let's make sure we capitalize those proper nouns. So sentence expansion is a great way to review content, to enhance writing, and to sneak in some of those mechanic skills as FCAs. You can see that in the science class, that proper noun FCA is only worth a small fraction of the total points, but it still lets the student know it counts. That kind of writing is important in my class too. We also have a few other things that are coming soon. I'm going to talk to you about a few other desktop guides that are coming, some digital resources, FCA stamps, and a new book that's going to be on its way in the next year. My apologies, I'm going the wrong way in my slides. So I talked to you about, we have these laminated guides. People love them, so we're coming out with more of them. So one of them I already said is the sentence expansion guide. That'll be available soon. Also available, we will have a guide to vocabulary cards and a guide to the 10% summary. So some of you might have been using those popular activities with your students already. We already do have some resources and the free resources on our website. We are now going to have laminated guides that really are more of a how-to. So that's what our laminated guides are all about. It gives you the resources that you can find online, but it also shows you how to implement that tool or that strategy. So we're really excited about these. And these are some of our most popular assignments that we've used with our students. The next thing, this was by teacher requests. I've been working with primary teachers for a long time. And every time I go into a primary school, teachers are working with the paper that you see here on the screen, and they're cutting out little symbols and gluing them on. And it's great, it works. But teachers have said to me, can't we have stamps? It would be so much easier if we could just stamp those things onto the paper. And then I can even go around and I can stamp some kids' papers with some FCAs and other kids' papers with different FCAs who have different needs. We're creating stamps. So we are going to have stamps for some of the most popular FCAs to start, like the crayon box for colors, the magnifying glass for details, the beginning caps and end marks, a period. We're going to have stamps for those. So kindergarten teachers, I heard you. We are creating these. I'm really excited about it. I hope it's going to make your life a whole lot easier, and it's going to make for better teaching because it'll be so simple for you to differentiate for your kids. And we can even have the kids stamping them themselves and taking ownership of their FCAs at that young age. The last piece of well, not the last piece, but the third piece of coming soon items are some digital resources. So we go kind of backwards in stamps to, really basic stuff. But then we also have a lot of our middle and high school classrooms who are very tech savvy, who are very driven by Google Classroom, and everything is on Chromebooks and laptops. We need resources for you too. So we are modernizing our resources. Our Collins portfolios, some of you might be familiar with these. These are where we have students place their type 3 writing so that they can pull it out and go back and make revisions. We can add to it. We can track growth over the course of the year. I love these portfolios, and you can see an example on the screen of how we can even build in that reflection component inside the portfolio where students are saying, what did they do well? What do they need to work on? We are now digitizing those. We have Cheryl McDonough, who's one of my associates. She is working to create a Google Classroom version of portfolios that we will make available to our schools so that teachers can use that resource. Kids can each have their own digital portfolio so that anybody who's working primarily on word processed writing, all of those pieces can go into the digital portfolio so that students have everything kind of in one place. That makes it easier for them to find things, and it makes it easy for us to look at progress throughout the year. On a simpler note, we are also going to be digitizing some of the free resources that you can find on our website now so that they'll be editable. So we make everything available PDF, but then you can't edit it. So we're making some of them are now going to be available as editable PDFs. For example, the HELPS worksheet is great for argument writing, helps kids to outline their reasoning and their evidence behind a claim. In the past, students had to write them. We're going to recreate this so that students can type their evidence into the chart instead of having to print it and handwrite it. Okay, so we're looking at a number of our resources and bringing them into the Google Classroom digital world to make it a little easier and classroom friendly for everybody. The last resource is the Developing an Effective Writing Program in the Elementary Grades book. Gary Chadwell, the author, was actually the associate who trained me in my first training when I fell in love with Collins. I am working now with him to update this book and add some new activities into it, add some new assignments, incorporate some graphic organizers, bring in some of the most current research. This is in the works. You're going to see it sometime within the next year or so. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be kind of an all-in-one, one-stop shopping for elementary teachers who are looking for a good overview and guidebook for the 5 types of writing. We talked about the new stuff, a couple old things that have been kind of in the works, old favorites. One is Checkmate. Checkmate is a great tool for teachers who are trying to improve kids' mechanics skills. Gives you lists of skills for each grade band in poster form, which is what you see on the left, and also in student form, which is what you see on the right. These are cardstock unfoldables, and they list all those mechanics skills so that you can teach them, you can refer to them, you can use them as FCAs in your classroom, you can highlight the ones that are the most important. Great tool. We also have some Blackline Masters that you can purchase along with these for daily practice in some of the skills that are cited. So we love Checkmate, absolutely a great resource and a teacher favorite. And of course, who doesn't need new posters in their classroom? We still have our posters. We've got the 5 types. We've got the writer's marks. You just saw the Checkmate posters. These are great to have in your classroom. We also have our associate, Bill Atwood, who really specializes in math. His book is great if any of you are math teachers and are looking for ideas on how to incorporate more writing and thinking in your math classroom. Bill has some really practical, fun, and engaging strategies in his book as well. So you've got your materials. You know what the program is about. If you're interested in learning more, what are our training options? So we always will come in and do one-day trainings for a whole school, a whole building, a whole district. That's usually where we start when it's a large group, but it's not the only option. What we recommend, and if you talk to anyone who's worked with us, what we recommend is the follow-up that counts. So if you've had training before, a 1 or a 2-day intro, the next step would be to do some modeling and coaching with a Collins associate. That means that I would come in, I would work in one of your classrooms, I would model some of the strategies that you heard about in training. We might work side by side to plan, and then we would execute a lesson. It might mean that I come in and visit your class, observe, and then give you some tips on, well, here's a place where you could use Collins. Here's a place where you could have used a type 2 writing. It might mean that we sit down at a table together and we look at your reading program and we find here are some places where we can link Collins writing to our Reading Wonders program. So we can do that kind of modeling and coaching. And from our experience and what we hear from other teachers that we work with, this is what really makes the difference in helping them understand Collins writing. So if you're a school leader and you haven't had training in a while, you may not have realized that this is an option for us to come in and do that kind of follow-up for you. If you are on your own and you're thinking, I really want to learn more about Collins, but I'm not in a position to hire Christine to come in and train me in my classroom, what's an option for you? We have our modules. These are available for purchase. They are broken up into several short sessions that you can watch on your own time, asynchronously, with little activities to try in between. So they're great ways for you to learn Collins writing on your own if you are interested in taking that on. If you are a school leader or a mentor or a literacy coach, and you know that your school is using Collins writing, but you have had an influx of new teachers in the past year or two, you might consider modules for those teachers as well. They can watch them on their own time. They can come, gather the information they need to get started with Collins writing. The last option that a lot of people don't know about is our institute option. This is especially good for small schools who are looking for some partnership. What an institute does is you agree as the host school to host training and invite outside participants to participate in the training alongside of your own teachers. For each outside participant that attends, you receive a credit off the price of the training. So we've worked with schools that actually received their training for free because they had enough teachers come and join them from outside buildings that it was able to pay for the in-house training. So this is a great option. I've done this often for small private schools that partner with multiple other private schools. It's great because it gets some collegial discussion going on. I've also done this with larger districts that want to kind of bring in others and get some discussion and engagement. It's a terrific option that you can reach out to us and we can tell you all about if you're looking for alternatives to the standard come in and train for a day one, and you need something that's, really budget friendly for yourself, the Institute might be the option. Okay. So I really thank you so much for joining me today. I thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit about Collins writing. I don't want this to be the end of our time together, so please don't hesitate to reach out with questions, with feedback. You can find me through email. That's usually the quickest way to get in touch with me, but you can also reach me by phone. And as I suggested throughout the session, I would love it if you would check out the website, read a little bit more about what we do, and then feel free to get in touch so that we can talk more about how I can help you in your classrooms. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the summer, and I hope to see all of you in person sometime soon. Take care.